Hello, hello. I am Coach Jay, Practitioner Jay, and it's a pleasure to serve the information I'm going to present to you today. I always start my class with a corny dad joke, so today's is this. Tablets were replaced by scrolls. Scrolls were replaced by books. Now we scroll through books on our tablets. Interesting. I guess that was more of a interesting little statement than a joke, but all right, if you want to take 2 deep breaths with me, in through the nose, slowly out through the mouth. We can do it on a count of 4. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. And breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about hypervigilance. So feeling safe means not feeling that you will soon be involved in a nuclear war or you're falling off a cliff. Feeling safe means not feeling worried about being criticized by those around you. It's also the ability to develop and use a safe place in your mind that could be accessed in the presence of trauma. That safe place is a natural device when we're born, but it's lost during abuse, neglect, abandonment, and most definitely during betrayal. A lot of things are affected after betrayal, from our intuition to our instinct to our hypervigilance to our self-esteem, you name it. Feeling safe also means being full of self-assurance. It means being full of doubt, feeling deeply that you deserve to live in the same environment that brings you happiness. Feeling wanted leads you to feel safe in the world. However, for many survivors of trauma, the world around us is no longer safe, and we're constantly hypervigilant. We're looking for danger around us. And even if we're not doing this consciously or cognizantly, our amygdala is constantly scanning around us, the area, to look for danger. This can leave us isolated and in fear, which, if left untreated, can cause many mental health problems or challenges. So hypervigilance. What is hypervigilance? Hypervigilance is a state of extreme alertness and makes a survivor who experiences it sensitive to their environment. Hypervigilance causes a survivor of childhood trauma or any trauma a feeling of unsafety, where they're just waiting for another episode of trauma. They're just waiting for another bomb to drop. And this is why I say trickle truths, which I don't even like that term, because there's no such thing as a trickle. It's a gouge. When you get a trickle truth, it's a gouge, and oftentimes a deeper gouge than before. Because when traumatized, you're always looking for that next bomb to drop. Anyways, being hypervigilant has adverse effects on the survivor's life and can affect how they interact with others and how they view them. It may also cause paranoia as the survival struggles with feeling unsafe. You know, after betrayal, you just don't feel safe in your relationship. You go to the grocery store and you feel unsafe around you. You might go to your job and feel unsafe with your boss. Oh, am I going to be fired? Are my coworkers going to do this? I mean, your whole world around you feels unsafe. The unsafe feeling isn't something the survivor can shake on their own, as it is their past and what's happened there. They usually require professional help. And if you're going to reconcile, reconnect, and rebuild with somebody, then that other person really needs to do their best in helping you feel safe. Many indicators accompany hypervigilance, including physical and emotional, behavioral, and mental symptoms. So, you could experience hypervigilance with a racing heartbeat. There's, fast and shallow breathing. There's sweating. There's fatigue, and sometimes extreme exhaustion. Because think about it. If your body, mind, and soul is always on edge, always scanning, it's always working. So this is why sometimes we feel just extreme fatigue, extreme exhaustion, because every organ in our body is working double time on keeping us safe and healing. Emotional symptoms of hypervigilance could be fear, could be panic, severe anxiety, persistent worrying, fear of judgment of others. We may judge others unfairly. There's emotional withdrawal. There's mood swings. There's emotional outbursts. There's also behavioral symptoms of hypervigilance. Feeling jumpy. I mean, you know what's interesting? And I was talking to somebody the other day, not here in PBT, outside of PBT, about trauma. And I was saying, you know what's interesting is so many times after betrayal or after trauma, people around us will be like, man, you've changed, or you're jumpy, or you're defensive, or you're this. Then we're with somebody who's gaslighting us, who's saying, man, you know, you're this, and they're blame shifting and they're pointing fingers. So now you're thinking, well, wait a minute. If my friends are saying I'm a changed person and I'm a monster and I'm defensive, I'm jumpy, and the person I'm with is saying this, maybe there is a lot wrong with me. No, there's not a lot wrong with you. You're traumatized and your body's responding to that. And maybe your friends don't know that you're enduring trauma, and all they see is the behavioral effects of that or results of that. So that's why betrayal just really gets convoluted into so many areas of our life. So behavioral symptoms could also include, you know, having knee-jerk reactions, overreaction to comments of others. I mean, so many times, you know, how many times, well, I don't know if this is in your situation, but a lot of times after we discover a betrayal, we'll be out with friends having drinks, having fun, having dinner, and they'll say something. And then we're thinking, well, wait a minute. Did they do something with our partner? Did they have a crush on our spouse? Did my partner think they were cute? And, you know, next thing you know, you're in zombie land, not paying attention. And then your friends are saying, hello, are you there? And then you snap at them because your mind was on, maybe they did A, B, and C with my partner. So I'm just letting you know, like, hypervigilance after betrayal is just, it's common, it's normal. There's nothing wrong with you. Your body is traumatized. There's also mental symptoms of hypervigilance. There's paranoia, sleep problems. And I don't have to tell you, if you don't get sleep, my Lord, it affects a lot of areas of your body. Physical manifestations come from lack of sleep because your body's not getting the proper rest it needs to heal. Your mind, mental results of lack of sleep, you know, you're moody, you're blasé, all this stuff. You have foggy brain, sometimes from hypervigilance, inability to concentrate, which is why a lot of times people, their work gets very affected after trauma, because not only are you constantly thinking of what happened and the secrets and the lies and the manipulation and the gaslighting and the deceit and what they did and who they did it with and what you were doing while they were doing it. But so it's taking you away from concentrating on your job, you know. Hypervigilance is very uncomfortable and can interfere significantly with the survivor's ability to interact appropriately with other people. You can't be in a meeting at work and effectively listen, actively listen, or participate in leading a meeting if your brain is hijacked. And then there's negative results to that. You know, hey, listen, you weren't on point in your meeting today, or you seemed like you were distracted during your meeting. I mean, these are all results of betrayal. An intimate relationship with a partner is complicated when you fear they might abandon or hurt you. And these are all things that we think about, obsess about after betrayal. And that affects our mind, body, soul, behavior, emotions, job, spiritual walk, relationship with friends or family. I can't tell you how many times I'm talking to people and they'll tell me, I don't even talk to my close friends or family anymore because I just, you know, A, I don't, if they know, I don't want the shame. B, I don't want them feeling bad. C, I don't want them knowing my business. I mean, it affects every area of our life. All right, triggers and feeling unsafe. So people experiencing fear and hypervigilance don't react appropriately to environmental triggers. These triggers cause the survivor to suddenly become filled with emotions that range from intense fear to rage. If you've been betrayed, especially by a primary attachment, mother, father, son, daughter, boss, significant other, we could feel rage that scares us. I mean, people do some crazy, it's not crazy in the moment, but I'm talking, you know, running people over and stabbing them and, you know, daydreaming about how they're going to get even with them, you know, by physically hurting them. There is rage that comes up inside when you're betrayed that, like I said, even can scare yourself. Anyways, some common triggers for hypervigilant episodes can be when we feel abandoned, especially if we were abandoned or neglected as children, and then our spouses or our partner makes us feel safe. And unfortunately, we put all of our eggs in that basket, and then they make us feel unsafe. We go right back to that little child who was unsafe. The only difference is now we're an adult. So we do have some empowerment. We do have some resources and tools. We do have a voice, unlike we did when we were a child. And boy, do we use it. If we feel trapped, these feelings can come out. If we feel judged, if we feel unwelcome or unloved, sometimes hearing loud noises can set us off. It could be sudden, it could be yelling, it could be arguing. My kids love to tap their fork on the plate, which I try to deal with as much as possible. And then sometimes, I'm like, before I lose my mind, stop the tapping on the plate. Sometimes we get into these modes if we anticipate pain or feel. Anticipatory anxiety is very big. Feeling physical pain or agony. Sometimes we can stub our toe, and that physical pain can result in engaging our fight or flight, our nervous system. And then next thing you know, we're in all these other things that are going on mentally and emotionally with us. Reminders of past trauma. Listen, our body keeps the score. We could drive by a store. We can drive by a restaurant. We can drive by a hotel. That reminds us of certain things, certain songs, certain smells. You name it. These can trigger us to where our hypervigilance comes out, which is why sometimes you could just be bathing, showering, doing the dishes, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a song comes on, a thought comes in, and you're literally brought down to your knees with these triggers because our body holds trauma. And when thoughts come in, our trauma is ignited, ignites our nervous system, completely hijacks our brain and overwhelms us. So anytime we're feeling out of control, which sometimes is why it's really sad, people that are going through betrayal or betrayal trauma, even when you're dealing with your kids, if our kids argue back with us, we can almost snap at them or lose patience or, lose it with them. It's because we lose control, but we're associating it with other things. It's very hard. We got to keep in the moment that this is our child. Their job is to keep pushing boundaries, but we don't think of that when our brain is hijacked. Anyway, some tips and suggestions for addressing hypervigilance that's caused from our trauma or betrayal. Number one, simply talking about it. And if you don't have anybody to talk about it with, talk to yourself. Some of the best conversations are when you talk to yourself. Grounding techniques, you can, there's the rainbow techniques, finding the different colors of the rainbows around you and naming them. There's the 5 things. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can hear, whatever the case is. Also, believe it or not, doing some math, because math takes you out of your amygdala and puts you in your frontal cortex. So do some math, whether it's math in your head immediately, 10 times 10 is 100, 10 minus 7 is 3. You're engaging your frontal cortex, not letting your brain get hijacked. Splash water on your face. That's called something, the aqua technique, whatever. It's effective for many people. Holding ice in your hands is a nice grounding technique. Deep, slow breathing. There's exercising, obviously. If you need to scream and punch a pillow or your steering wheel, if you want to go out to your car, you can exercise. If you have to medicate, but, prayer also, yoga, journaling. Acknowledge your feelings, acknowledge your emotions, practice mindfulness if you can. Mindfulness is just thinking about what you're thinking about. And setting healthy boundaries for yourself. And most importantly, keeping those boundaries for yourself. So never feeling safe is a tragic consequence of trauma. It really is. However, you do not need to remain victimized by this internal problem. Through consistent work, you may learn new and effective ways to cope and not feel unsafe. not to be in a constant state of hypervigilance that accompanies this. Feeling unsafe is exhausting and a real problem when forming relationships. And only through appropriate and consistent healing techniques can you escape the pain and the suffering of hypervigilance. One of the things that I tell people a lot is when we don't feel safe, and especially because if we're going through something where, a primary attachment, whether it's our brother, our sister, our spouse, our parent, betrayed us, we don't know what's real. And so you have to go back to the basics, step outside and say, okay, you know what's real? The sun is real. And the sun's going to go down tonight. And then tomorrow morning, the sun's going to rise. And you have to give yourself a technique of something that's real and something that you can count on. What can you count on? Because if you can't count on anything or anyone around you, what can you count on? I can count on the sun going down today. I can count on the sun going up tomorrow. And then when it happens, it gives your body a sensation of there are things you can count on. Start small and work on, going bigger with things that you can feel safe and count on. I hope that helps. And I hope you got something out of my class.